And joining me now is Nile Gardiner with the Heritage Foundation. He's a former advisor to the late Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Now, before I come to you, I just want to show our viewers, if I may, some live pictures that we have coming in of the royal family. See if I can see. There you have some live pictures coming from Portsmouth. Actually, we've just lost that feed, but as soon as we have that in, we will bring it to you. But I'm joined now by Nile Gardiner. And Nile, I'm not sure whether you heard that little clip from President Trump on the NHS, because he kind of backtracked a bit, because we heard yesterday in his press conference, standing next to Theresa May, Prime Minister, who's stepping down on Friday, saying that everything was on the table. Now he's saying actually might not be. Should we take his word for it? I mean, how do you read this? How do you read this back and forth? Because we don't really know where we stand with President Trump. Right.
Well, I've closely followed the discussions between the US and the UK over a free trade agreement over the course of the last 2 years. I've met many members of Congress regarding a US-UK free trade deal. The issue of the NHS has never actually come up at all. It hasn't been an agenda item for discussion. And so I do think the NHS issue is actually a non-issue for a US-UK free trade deal. And of course, there are great sensitivities in Britain over the National Health Service.
Correct.
I think the President understands that. I don't think this is going to be, you know, some big part of the deal. I think it was a question asked in a news conference. The President simply responded, everything's on the table. He later, I think, went back on that suggestion. Because after all, I don't think the issue of the National Health Service at all has featured whatsoever in already 2 years of very detailed discussions between London and Washington on a US-UK free trade agreement. And so I think that this is really a non-story. At the end of the day.
Well, a non-story, but nevertheless, if you just look at the British press, something that many are very worried about, because it is the jewel in the crown. I mean, we saw some of the footage there from D-Day commemorations taking part in Portsmouth and in parts of France as well. What do you think are the lessons for President Trump? A president who we know is very much America first. We've got elections coming up, 2020 elections. What do you think he can get away? As he stands there, he hears a speech for the Queen, he hears his 300 veterans, the stories, the memories of that day. What does he walk away with?
Well, I think, firstly, President Trump is a big believer in the US-UK special relationship. He's a tremendous admirer of Great Britain and the alliance between the US and the UK. He's also a supporter of the Transatlantic alliance as well. And you have seen, actually, the NATO alliance, in fact, strengthened over the past 2 years, increased defense spending, not least as a result of increased US pressure. So this is a president who is not an isolationist in any way, but who does firmly believe in the importance of the Transatlantic alliance. That's not going to change.
And we're seeing, as you're talking, we're seeing the royal family meeting veterans there in Portsmouth. Some 300 or so veterans are there taking part in those commemorations. There was some music festivals, some bands playing as well, and we see the Queen there in that looking very dashing in a pink hat, and President Trump there and the First Lady Melania Trump. The celebrations have ended for now, but now they're taking the time to meet some of the 300 or so veterans. Just so our viewers understand in terms of numbers that we know, it's exact numbers of casualties on that day is very hard to know, but estimated about 10,000 Allied soldiers were killed, wounded, or in fact went missing in action. Just over 6,600 were Americans, 2,700 British, and 946 Canadians. So today will be about, it's not so much about the dignitaries or the world leaders or the Queen. It really is about these veterans who have stories to tell, many of them well over 90 years of age, and keeping this memory alive, keeping their stories alive for generations to come. Now, I want to go back to you as we keep looking at those images from moments ago. You were saying the importance, talking about NATO. We heard from President Trump saying that NATO is obsolete. We know, we heard from the Queen, in fact, hinting at the importance of these of cooperation. Do you think he'll take any of that on board, or it really doesn't matter?
I think the president strongly believes in NATO. He just believes that NATO allies need to invest more in their own defense. And actually, the number of US troops on the ground in Europe has increased under the Trump presidency, and you're about to see the possibility of a permanent US base being set up in Poland. And so this is a president who does believe in the importance of organizations like NATO, which are very, very effective. He's much more skeptical, of course, about the European Union.
Well, I was going to say that. You say that, but he's against the UN, very much skeptical of the EU. Also, he's pulled out of climate change agreement, the Paris Climate Change Accord.
He basically believes, really, that international organizations should be effective and efficient. He's withdrawn the US from some UN organizations that are seen as corrupted, bloated bureaucracies. He believes in value for money for US taxpayers, is what the American people expect. He's not, though, someone who is withdrawing the United States from the NATO alliance or from the United Nations. He believes in American leadership on the world stage, but he believes that all US allies should pull their weight, work together with the United States in confronting the threats to the free world. So that really is his message. And especially that all NATO countries, especially countries like Germany, France, for example, need to spend more on their own defense and match the levels of spending by Great Britain and especially by the United States.
That may be the case, but once he gets back home, it's very much about American first, something that plays very well with his base. Nile Gardiner, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us here.